Every empire has its killers, but it also has its accountants. Michoacán, Mexico, 1960s, a land of ranches, mountains, and silence. From here emerged one of Mexico's most discreet and dangerous dynasties, the Gonzalez Valencia family. They were not loud like the Sinaloans, not flashy like the Tijuana clan. They were quiet, patient, deadly. The world would come to know them as Los Quines, a name whispered in corridors of power, a name that meant wealth, control, precision. There were at least 18 siblings, 6 brothers and several sisters, each one a thread in a web that would stretch across continents. Abigail, the eldest brother, would become the face of the clan, El Queenie. Brilliant, calculating, obsessed with money. He was less a trafficker than a banker, less a killer than an investor. While most cartels fought to move cocaine into the United States, Los Quines did something different. They looked south, Europe, Asia, Australia. Markets ignored by others became gold mines for them. Grams sold at U.S. prices could be doubled, even tripled overseas. It was mathematics, cold, ruthless mathematics, and behind the men, behind the warehouses, the roots, the billions, stood the sisters. Women who didn't carry rifles but carried something heavier, legitimacy. They ran businesses. They signed contracts. They became the mask of legality for an empire dripping with blood. Among them was Rosalinda, born into poverty like her brothers, raised in a world where survival meant discipline. She learned early that silence was a weapon, that invisibility was a shield. Her role was not the battlefield. It was the balance sheet, restaurants, real estate, shell companies. Money turned clean. Clean money turned into power. In the 1980s, when Mexican trafficking was still dominated by the Guadalajara cartel, the Gonzalez Valencia clan quietly grew. No headlines, no shootouts, just expansion. By the time Rosalinda married Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, better known as El Mencho, the clan had already built a reputation. They weren't just traffickers, they were financiers. And with that marriage, bloodline met ambition. Los Queenies became the financial backbone of what would evolve into the CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, a partnership of fire and ice. Mencho brought war. Rosalinda and her family brought order. Together, they created a model few could match. While rival cartels spent fortunes on violence, Los Queenies multiplied fortunes in silence. Money bought weapons, money bought politicians, money bought survival. For decades, the clan remained hidden in plain sight. Abigail was arrested in 2015, but even in custody, his empire continued to hum. Because empires are not built on men alone, they are built on families. And the Gonzalez Valencia family was a machine, each sibling a cog, each cog essential, each move calculated. Rosalinda was not the loudest, nor the most feared, but in the shadows, she became indispensable. Because when an empire bleeds money, it dies, and she was the one who stopped the bleeding. She was not a soldier. She was an accountant. And in the world of cartels, accountants decide who lives and who vanishes. They called her La Jefa, the boss, not because she carried rifles or sprayed bullets, but because she controlled something far more lethal: money. Rosalinda González Valencia didn't need a gun to kill. She had signatures, bank accounts, networks of shell companies that stretched from Guadalajara to Panama, from Jalisco to California. Her work was invisible, no blood on her hands. But every peso she laundered became a bullet in the street. Every clean dollar was a coffin waiting to be filled. The Gonzalez Valencia clan, the Queenies, were always different. They weren't just gunmen. They were businessmen. They learned early that violence attracts attention, but numbers hide in plain sight. Rosalinda embodied that philosophy. While her brothers brokered shipments, she perfected the art of disguise, construction firms that never built, farms that never grew, hotels where no guests ever stayed. Each company was a mask. Each mask covered rivers of cartel cash. And behind those masks, Rosalinda was always there, calculating, erasing, transforming. She didn't dress like power, no gold chains, no armored convoys. Just quiet elegance, the kind that melted into a crowd. But if you traced the ledgers, all roads led back to her. Supermarkets, gas stations, clothing stores, a web of businesses, ordinary on the surface, rotten at the core. Her genius wasn't in making money, it was in making dirty money disappear. She understood the mathematics of survival. If the state can't see it, the state can't touch it. Inside the CJNG, Mencho ruled with terror. But terror costs money. Guns, vehicles, salaries for sicarios, nothing ran without fuel. And Rosalinda was the one who pumped it. In a world where betrayal was routine, Rosalinda was more than just an operator. She was family. And in the cartel world, family meant something deeper than blood. It meant certainty. It meant loyalty. It meant survival. Agents from the DEA called her the financial brain. They suspected she helped move hundreds of millions through global circuits. But suspicion is not proof. And proof was exactly what Rosalinda erased. Her power was subtle. She never raised her voice, never gave speeches. But her silence weighed heavier than a warlord's shout. Where others relied on armies, she relied on invisibility. And invisibility was the most dangerous weapon of all. Because in the cartel world, guns build fear, but money builds empires. And Rosalinda González Valencia understood one truth better than anyone else. Wars end, leaders fall, but the money always finds a way to survive. In a business where trust dies quickly, she was family. And family meant survival. She married Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, the ghost who became a king. At first, he was a shadow, a low-level enforcer, a survivor of Michoacan's blood-soaked soil. He was quiet, patient, watching, just like Rosalinda. Together, their silence became strategy. Marriage bound them. But it wasn't just love. It was an alliance, a merger of bloodlines, of vision, of ambition. El Mencho brought violence, discipline, and the cold brutality of the street. Rosalinda brought the ledgers, the laundering, the cloak of invisibility. Together, they fused muscle and mathematics. CJNG was not born overnight. It rose from ashes, first as lieutenants for the Millennial Cartel, then as predators when their bosses fell. Where others saw collapse, they saw opportunity. Mencho commanded gunmen who killed without hesitation. Rosalinda built networks that turned piles of bloody cash into legitimacy. If Mencho was fire, Rosalinda was water. He burned, she concealed. He fought, she balanced. One destroyed, the other rebuilt. Inside their home, the roles were invisible but absolute. Mencho decided who lived and who died. Rosalinda decided which company existed, which account was erased, which investment turned poison into profit. She wasn't just his wife. She was his partner. Every empire needs a king, but kings fall without queens to protect the crown. The marriage created a fortress. Rosalinda's brothers, the Queenies, were among the wealthiest traffickers alive, specialists in moving cocaine across continents. They merged with Mencho's growing army, brains and bullets, ledgers and blood. It was a union that stretched beyond romance. It was cartel architecture, the blueprint of CJNG. While Mencho declared war on rivals, the Zetas, the Sinaloa cartel, Rosalinda wove a safety net. She purchased properties, funded businesses, and concealed fortune after fortune. When soldiers raided warehouses, the cash was already gone, hidden in corporations that looked legitimate on paper. She didn't just hide his money, she amplified it. Every peso recycled became 5 more. Every dollar cleaned became a weapon bought, a politician bribed, a plaza secured. This was not a marriage of equals in appearance. Mencho stood at the front, his name whispered across Mexico. Rosalinda stayed behind curtains, her name known only in quiet circles. But appearances lie. Behind every phone call Mencho made, behind every convoy that rolled into battle, there was Rosalinda's invisible approval. Without her, CJNG would have been just another cartel. With her, it became a global corporation of blood. Theirs was a kingdom built on two pillars. Mencho ruled with terror. Rosalinda ruled with silence. And together they spread across oceans. He fought wars, she hid the gold, and that balance made them unstoppable. She didn't command convoys. She commanded signatures. Rosalinda González Valencia understood something her enemies never did. That the pen could be sharper than a machete. That a bank transfer could crush a city more efficiently than a convoy of sicarios. With one order, she moved millions. She bought silence. She purchased loyalty. And when loyalty couldn't be bought, she erased the problem with the quiet stroke of an accountant's pen. No bullets, just ink. But ink can be more lethal than lead. The violence of CJNG didn't only come from rifles in the streets of Guadalajara or mass graves in Jalisco. It came from the quiet documents Rosalinda signed in boardrooms. A property deed here, a cashier's check there, a paper trail so clean it vanished. Every peso washed was another trigger pulled in the field. Every dollar legitimized meant another official on the payroll. She bought politicians the way others bought cattle, wholesale by the herd. She didn't negotiate in threats. She negotiated in deposits. Election campaigns fueled by cartel money. Municipal projects funded by shell companies. The men with guns frightened the people. But Rosalinda frightened the state. Because she blurred the line between government and cartel until even seasoned investigators could no longer tell the difference. Auditors who asked too many questions were silenced. Sometimes with bribes, sometimes with fear, and sometimes they simply disappeared, vanished into the Mexican night, leaving only unanswered phone calls and grieving families. But in the files, in the books, everything was perfect. The numbers always balanced, and as long as the numbers looked clean, no one in power dared to touch her. Her terror was subtle. You didn't see it on the evening news. You felt it in the way cities kept functioning under cartel control. Schools stayed open. Shops sold bread. But behind every paycheck, every loan, every supermarket receipt, there was the hidden shadow of Rosalinda's ink. In the world of organized crime, most leaders wanted to be remembered as killers. Rosalinda wanted to be forgotten. She wanted her fingerprints invisible, her presence erased. That was her genius and her curse. Because invisibility doesn't last forever. Every system, no matter how well designed, leaves cracks. And Rosalinda's empire of paper would one day face the weight of proof. Still, for years, she thrived in silence. The terror she commanded wasn't the kind that splashed across front pages. It was the quiet terror of knowing that everything, your job, your paycheck, your vote, might already belong to her. No bullets, just ink. But ink was the weapon that built CJNG's empire. 2018. The mask finally cracked. For years, Rosalinda González Valencia had been untouchable, hidden behind companies, receipts, signatures no one dared question. But that year, the Mexican government moved. She was accused of laundering millions for the CJNG. Millions that kept El Mencho's army alive. Millions that turned bullets into power. And suddenly, La Jefa, the woman behind the books, was in handcuffs. The arrest made headlines. A queen had fallen. The government paraded it as victory. proof that the state was finally willing to cut at the roots of CJNG. But prison, for Rosalinda, was never a cage. It was a pause. 3 months, that was all. 3 months behind bars before she walked free. The official explanation: lack of evidence. The unofficial truth: the web she wove was too perfect, too invisible, too important for too many powerful hands. Rosalinda went home, and the message was clear. If she could beat the system once, she could beat it again. Yet freedom was temporary. The state had tasted blood and it wanted more. By 2021, pressure from the United States was mounting. CJNG wasn't just another cartel anymore, it was the cartel, and Washington wanted its queen. November 15, 2021. Authorities struck again. This time, she was captured in Zapopan, Jalisco. No convoy of sicarios to defend her. No escape route. Just quiet, precise, surgical arrest. The government promised things would be different. No easy exits, no loopholes. She would face trial for laundering, for building the financial skeleton of CJNG. But promises in Mexico are fragile things. Everyone knew the truth. Judges can be bought. Witnesses can vanish. Files can burn in mysterious fires. And CJNG's shadow stretched across every level of power. From the governor's office to the local police chief. From banks to town halls. To lock up Rosalinda was to declare war not just on her, but on the entire machine she kept alive. In the mountains, El Mencho still commanded armies. Sicarios pledged their lives to him. Plazas still paid tribute, and the money kept flowing, even without Rosalinda at the desk. Because her system, once built, could run without her. That was her true power. Not her presence, but her design. Not her voice, but her silence. The state had captured a woman, but it had not captured the empire. They promised she wouldn't walk free again. But in Mexico, promises are just paper, and paper burns easily. Today, Rosalinda González Valencia sits in silence. No boardrooms, no shell companies, no quiet meetings over contracts written in invisible ink. A prison cell is her kingdom now. 4 walls, iron bars, endless hours of stillness. But silence doesn't erase legacy. Her name still moves like a ghost through spreadsheets. Her fingerprints remain in real estate deeds, in corporations that look clean but bleed shadows. Every supermarket chain with strange investors. Every gas station with money that doesn't add up. Every property that shifted hands overnight. Her shadow lives there. Because cartels don't just need killers. Killers are everywhere. They need architects, builders, engineers who know how to design empires that outlive bloodshed. Rosalinda was one of the best. The Queeness taught her patience. Her marriage to El Mencho gave her reach. Together, they created something larger than violence, a system. CJNG's power was not just its rifles or convoys, it was the financial skeleton Rosalinda helped shape. Without her, the money would have rotted in safe houses, eaten by rats, buried in fields. With her, it became an organism, flexible, invisible, nearly invincible. She didn't leave behind monuments of stone or statues of bronze. Her monuments are corporations, banks that turned dirty pesos into clean dollars, politicians who rose to power with her silent funding, generations of sicarios who marched with weapons bought by her math. Her story is a paradox. To the state, she is a criminal. To the poor, she is almost mythical, la esposa del Mencho, the woman who held the empire together. And inside the underworld, she is remembered as proof that power does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. History will remember Escobar for his brutality, Chapo for his escapes, Mencho for his war. And Rosalinda? She will be remembered as the accountant who kept the blood flowing. The queen who sat behind the curtain, never pulling the trigger, yet leaving thousands of bodies in her shadow. Even now, behind bars, she remains a symbol. To her enemies, she is proof the state can reach into the financial heart of a cartel. To her allies, she is a martyr of the system, another sacrifice demanded by power. To CJNG itself, she is irreplaceable, because empires can recruit new killers. They can crown new kings. But an architect like Rosalinda comes once in a generation. She never fired a shot, but every bullet in CJNG's war carried her signature.